Work-based learning is the glue between your instructional programs, both academic and career and industry. And we've got to start fulfilling promises, or gosh, sometimes I'm worried we may not get those industry people back.
Counselors are the most underrated power players in the school.
1,000%.
Seriously.
I agree. Yeah. If it's done well. I found when I came back to school counseling the second time, I had a really hard time with sitting in meetings with students and talking about their future, or talking about, okay, what's our plans? And they were like, I don't know.
My attempt to do this is because in my practice, with what I do, the counselors are inundated with every single new program that comes into a school.
And I actually did my own personal YouScience, and it blew my whole mind. I was like, what is happening? Like, our students have access to this. Like, this is the greatest. And it changed the whole thought process of how I wanted to work with students. Because I was like, we got to change everything. We got to blow this up and we got to start again. Because if we have this tool where we can give students their strengths, their aptitudes, what they're good at, what they like, we can move forward with a plan.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education podcast, powered by YouScience. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome to this episode of the Disrupt Education podcast. I'm Peter Hostrawser. That is Alli Dahl. We got some guests coming up, but before we jump into them, Alli, what's happening? How are you?
I'm good. And, we usually have a little banter before we hit that big old record button. I'm jazzed to disrupt education this week and on the podcast, because we're doing something a little different. Like, we're doing a kind of a mini series here, and rather than like us just recap some stuff, we're gonna pull in and expand with our awesome guests today. But the banter kind of like, I had a quote, so I opened up last week with a quote, and this week I felt like I wanted to have a quote to kind of guide the conversation. And so this week's quote is from William Faulkner. And it said, "You cannot swim for new horizons until you have courage to lose sight of the shore." And I was thinking about this in terms of like what that means for students. And like for a lot of students, the shore is like what they know, the classes that they've taken, the paths that they've already seen, and the expectations set around them by whoever. And then in our last episode, so we talked about like how work-based learning helps students see beyond that, like new possibilities, new pathways, new jobs, new versions of themselves. And then I was like, okay, well, just because you've seen something new doesn't mean that you actually know how to move towards it. And so that's where we're kind of going in this week's episode, is like, how do we get there? How do we get away from the shore? Because I just think like without the right support or the right guidance, students are going to drift. They're just going to drift into whatever like life kind of pushes them towards, where the current takes them. It's not really like they're choosing it. So today we're just exploring how schools can change that, and like how can we align advising, how can we align opportunities, work-based learning, and help students move towards like clarity and confidence.
I love that. I imagined right away a boat, really cool boat with no motor, right? It's got all the stuff on it, except you're not moving. So we've got two guests. One is a habitual repeater, I'm going to call him. We have Jason Van Nuss, Work-Based Learning Program Director, the gentle disruptor, although if you talk to him off camera, he's not that gentle sometimes. So apprenticeship and talent pipeline specialist. And we're going to throw in YouScience aptitude Sherpa. There we go. So that's you. Welcome, Jason.
Glad to be here. You sound like a third grade teacher calling me a repeater. Only took me 3 times to get through, but I made it.
I caught him mid-drink. That was awesome. And then we have Dani Natter. She's a district leader at Granite School District and a former school counselor. Very excited to have you here, Dani.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much.
All right. So, Alli, you did kind of say, and I like the Faulkner quote, like, you cannot swim for new horizons until you have the courage to lose sight of the shore. So opportunities don't create direction, systems do. Is that where we're going?
That's where I hope we're going. And I do want to say that like we've wanted to have a school counselor on the podcast for a long time.
Hmm.
And because that voice is so important and so critical in a school. And so we're just really excited, Dani, that you're here with us. And I know, Jason, you work a lot with school counselors in your work. And so kind of just seeing like how do teachers and district leaders work and amplify that? And so I kind of just want to open it up, Jason, since you've been on a few times,
Mhm.
and whatnot, like, and you introduced us to a lot of ideas around work-based learning, and you've been in the space for years. So I just want you to kind of take us back a minute and like,
Sure.
where did this work start for you? And how has your thinking kind of like evolved when it comes to integrating work-based learning into a school system?
All right. So it started for me. Gosh, it's not a real cool story. But I mean, it's kind of like how I got into education. Didn't really come about with the most altruistic motives. But it was where I was supposed to be. So I was teaching graphic communications at a school, and the leadership changed, and I saw some things coming down the pipe that I wasn't really a big fan of. And I was like, I've been driving 50 miles. Well, 50 minutes is probably a better description. One way. So two counties over, one way. So I think, I'm a nerd, did the math. It was like, almost a year of my life. Like it's like 47 weeks of my life commuting for 12 years to a school. And every day I would drive by the school I work at now. I love the culture. I love the people there. But as the people and culture started to change, I was just like, I'm gonna get out of here. And the school in my community was offering work-based learning, and I saw it required a CTE cert, and I was like, I can probably learn how to do that. I don't know what it is, but we'll do it. And that's kind of how I got into it. And I've always been a career educator, so I just didn't know the intricacies of work-based learning. So that's I wish I had like this cloud parting ray of light hitting me in the face like calling story. It wasn't like that, but man, I think however you want to qualify or quantify my skill set, I think it's just a really good fit for the partnership side of work-based learning.
Nice.
Um, and what was the second part of your question?
How has your thinking kind of like evolved when it comes to integrating work-based learning
Oh.
into kind of a school culture, school system?
Well, so for me, it's really easy for schools to have a work-based learning program, especially, well, let me say, it's easy for them to have it because to the person who's not passionate about it, work-based learning also has a lot of peripheral benefits. Case in point, when you really look at work-based learning across the scope of what it is, you're leveraging private sector laboratories for public consumption. So think about that. My school can't afford a $4 million automotive lab, but I can put my kid at the automotive facility, the local Ford dealership or Toyota, or I don't know who's sponsoring you guys nowadays. I don't want to give the wrong name. But or the hospital, like our healthcare, and we can't afford all the equipment in our healthcare pathway, but we can put those kids out there. So you're leveraging private sector laboratories for public consumption. That work-based learning tends to draw people, especially on that point alone, who don't really have the most genuine of motives. Okay, if that makes sense. It's going to um, get students off of campus. Now, I'm not using these as selling points for your audience. I'm not saying, I'm saying, here's why people who don't have a genuine motive are going to look at work-based learning and say, so I'm starting now with the bad part of the culture, or people where it's not part of the culture, rather. They would say it's going to get students off our campus, so it's going to lighten and lessen our student to teacher ratio. It's going to have students off campus, so the kids who aren't interested in academics, it's going to make them. It'll minimize discipline, those types of things. And when it really boils down to it, work-based learning, when it's run, the way it can be run like a cash cow for a school. It really can, because especially in Georgia, Peter, I don't know how it is with you, but in Georgia, there really isn't a limit on how many students I can put in my program.
Hmm.
And so, but I'm drawing down full FTE K weight funding for a student who's not even on campus.
Hmm.
Now, that's how people tend to extort what work-based learning is. That's how you get bad players in work-based learning. That's how you get people, uh, bad hires in work-based learning. Those are all side benefits to what work-based learning is, and they're not bad. But when those are your main goal, so I would say that's what you get when work-based learning is just a program at a school, and when it's not built into and ingrained, woven into the tapestry of their culture. When it's woven into the culture, and I'll say that's honestly, it's pretty rare that I would say that there's schools where work-based learning is woven into the culture. I mean, I think a lot of people, even the best practitioners I know in the space, are consistently having to fight the academic versus career culture, and I've written a lot about that. You guys know that. But when it's a part of the culture, it really becomes student centric. It is it is about, how do we serve our students best, right? The hands-on learning, the practicing, you know, that type. But it also becomes, and you hear Christy Valesky talk a lot about this. This is one of her and my favorite topics to talk about, is the economic development side of work-based learning. So when it's part of the culture, it's less about what people can do for the school. I talk about this a lot, and it's like hire our kids versus I'm giving you access to talent. There's a big difference there. I'm telling you, I need you to hire our kids. Industry's doing the action, I'm the beneficiary. But I can communicate the same thing by saying, I'm giving you access to talent. And so that's the shift, is when it's part of the culture, it's how can we leverage our students, not in the bad way, but tax dollars coming into our school, building talent. How can we leverage that talent to benefit school, culture, industry, employers, across the board? So I guess if you say that, it's to summarize that, it's work-based learning when it's not part of the culture is about how can the school benefit. Work-based learning when it is part of culture is how can we leverage what we're doing in the schools to build everybody up, including students, administrators, industry partners, economic developers, that kind of stuff.
So let's focus on one of those right now. Let's look inside that culture, a culture that is working. And with your work and experience in schools, how have you seen like maybe the best examples? We have Dani here. We're going to go to you in a minute, but best examples of counselors and work-based learning actually working together to guide those students and not just place them. Because I feel like when things aren't working, it's a checkbox. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
we've got these openings, blah, blah, blah. But what are some of the best examples you've seen so far, Jason? And we're coming over to the pro in a minute. That's you, Dani.
So, gosh, I mean, the best examples of when it's working well is you begin to see what I call a both and approach to career counseling, where the student doesn't have to choose. Okay, and I hope this makes sense. But traditionally, there's been an either or approach to career counseling, meaning, all right, Peter, you're my student. You come to me, and it's like you can either be an AP Trig student or you can be an architecture student, but you really don't have room in your schedule to be both,
Hmm.
right? And that's really harmful. That's really, really harmful, because you're forcing a student to choose between two things when schools should be actively trying to integrate those two things. Chris Nesmith has done a great job of doing this in his district. He's superintendent out in Alma, out in the Seattle area, where students take one course and get credit for both a CTE class and an advanced math. Like that's the kind of stuff we should be doing. Phenomenal stuff like that. So, that's one of the best examples, is when you have work-based learning and counseling coming together, you begin to see students who get the both and approach. Meaning I can both be an academic student and excel in career and do work-based learning. Where it's not, again, part of that culture, you're going to really see counselors push students to, well, you really need the AP course if you want to go to college. And students are starting to see through that. They're starting to see through that push towards just the open throat of academia, compared to the opportunity that exists in the other way. And again, I never want to have students choose. I never want to have students like I don't want to force them to choose. I want to lay out all their options and say, all right, here's what you can do. And I'll bring in how I use YouScience. Your aptitudes say that you would be good at this. So let's just say it's drafting. Do you want to go to college? Yes. Okay, then architecture is probably the way to go. Here's a plan to get there. Oh, you don't want to go to college. I mean, you can be a draftsman and not have to go get a 4-year degree. And so I'm showing the student what they're good at, and I'm saying, what do you want to do? That's the both and approach, where it typically is, oh, you're drafting. Well, if you can succeed in college, you have to try that first, and that's what's detrimental. And UScience allows me to put that ball in the student's court and say, what do you want to do, and how can I help you get there? I just become the facilitator, almost like a mission vision. Like I'm giving the student the vision. Where do you want to go? They give me the vision, and I'm like, all right, now, so missions where you're going, or visions where you're going, missions how you get there. They're giving me the vision where they want to go, and then I begin to help them develop the mission. And YouScience is integral to how I do that on the career counseling level.
It's the boat with the engine.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Boat with the engine. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but see, here's another thing is that this is just a real quick, having a boat without the engine, you don't go anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you have the engine without the boat, you're just going to sink. Like, I mean, that thing's
Oh, there we
so,
go.
and so you have to have both. I think people can really rely on work-based learning apart from academics, and that's not great either. And so you have to have those things together. And I found that youth science it's not even the most effective tool. It is the only effective tool I've found to blend those two things together in a seamless. It's almost kind of like a silo bridge, if that makes sense. You've got counselors over here who are super busy doing their stuff, and work-based learning coordinators over here, and career tech coordinators, and YouScience is the silo bridge between those two. It allows us to speak common language and serve the student without forcing them into one path or the other. Let them choose.
Yeah.
So, Dani, this is where I'm like, I really want to know your perspective. You were a counselor, now you're working like more at the district level to probably implement stuff you did as a counselor to impact more people. And so, like, and we just don't have this perspective, right? So, how do and like tell us a little bit about like your background and the work you've done. But like, kind of tell us a little bit about like how you've seen your work kind of transform with direction, like helping kids get off the shore, so to speak, and just, give us a little bit about like what has changed in your work and everything as it's kind of evolved.
Well, first of all, you guys are like speaking my language, because our theme for this year with my counselors is charting your course, navigating with purpose. And we're like totally using the whole nautical theme. So many analogies. I could keep going all day long with these, because we've been using them all year. But no, for sure. So like you said, I was a high school counselor up until last year. So I am just brand new in my position this school year. And really, I had kind of gone back and forth. I was a teacher and then a school counselor, and then I had worked at the district level, went back to school counseling for a little bit. And I found when I came back to school counseling the second time, I had a really hard time with sitting in meetings with students and talking about their future, or talking about, okay, what's our plans? And they were like, I don't know. And we're getting to that senior year. We were doing, in fact, I had been like part of a pilot program in Utah that we were really focusing on Utah College Application Week and that whole college application week, and providing access to college to every student. And we had done all this work for a number of years, and we thought we were doing so great. And I was like, okay, well, I'm patting myself on the back for all this work, but I still have kids that no matter all this access and all this work, they're still saying, I don't know. So we're not doing our job. And I really wanted to look at, how do we do that? Like, how do we fix that problem to where students are no longer saying, I don't know, that they have a plan, they know what they're doing. And I was starting at a new school where I kind of had the opportunity that we had a lot of new teams. So we really started to look at like, okay, we've got to clean up what's going on. And we started with like, what's our focus? Like, if we need to focus, what are we doing? And ours was that every student leaves with a diploma and a plan. Like, that was it. We want a diploma and a plan. And that evolved to something so much bigger. And our mission statement and everything came out of that. But it really honestly started with diploma and a plan. And we were just implementing YouScience. And our district was kind of pushing, hey, let's start YouScience. And because I am a raise hand or rule follower, I was like, sweet, I'm going to be the best at YouScience. I'm going to be the greatest. I'm going to do this. I don't even know what this is, but I'm going to jump on board. And I actually did my own personal YouScience, and it blew my whole mind. I was like, what is happening? Like, our students have access to this. Like, this is the greatest. And it changed the whole thought process of how I wanted to work with students. Is I was like, we got to change everything. We got to blow this up and we got to start again. Because if we have this tool where we can give students their strengths, their aptitudes, what they're good at, what they like, we can move forward with a plan. They're not just randomly picking words that they've heard people say before, that they think my only options are to be an engineer or a computer programmer or a teacher or a doctor. Like, they really can see, wait, these are my strengths, and this is how I can then translate that possibly to work, possibly to education, whatever that looks like. And so we really started to work through that and through our individual planning with students, and it grew into something so much bigger than I ever thought it would, to where we really based everything that we did upon that intentional planning with students, the individualization, and like circling back to our analogy, right, is that you can have a boat and it can have a motor, but someone has to drive that boat. And it has to be the student, because I could want to drive it as the counselor. The parent might want to drive the boat. Ours, our CTE coordinators might want to drive the boat. Everybody wants to tell this student what they should be doing. But at the end of the day, the student can have all the tools, but if they don't know how to drive the boat, they're not going to get anywhere. And so we really had to say, that was where we brought in YouScience, intentional planning, so that no matter who they spoke with, whether it be their counselor, whether it be one of our CTE coordinators, whether it be one of our programs that were coming in to help, that they were the ones saying, hey, this is what I see myself. This is what I'm good at. These are my strengths. This is how you can help me. And bringing that circling in. And we really saw that once we started just doing something as simple as that, is, hey, what's going on, really intentionally planning, individualized, saying what, this is where it goes, planning it out with documents, attaching it to their YouScience, planning that way, that we saw these huge growth aspects in so many areas. Our student outcomes started to change where we never guessed they would. Our failure rates went down. Our graduation rate maintained. Things that normally we don't, but as we did that, especially like building a master schedule, it's such a crazy thing, right? As we're trying to get students in the right classes. And a lot of times it's a bit of just like chaos. It's like, I don't know, we think these are the classes we need, and they've requested them, and we thought we were doing such a good job because we were building schedules off of student request, but they were just requesting random classes. They were requesting whatever their friend sitting next to him was requesting, and it had no intention behind it. It had no plan forward. And then they did get to their junior or senior year and wanted to participate in things like work-based learning or internships or different things, and they didn't have room in their schedule. Because I, as a counselor, had to say, I'm so sorry, you still have 1.5 fine art credits. Like, you didn't do it, or we didn't pathway correctly to where we talked about things. So we then circled back again and said, okay, what are we going to start doing? And that's where we really started to get students and our teachers to plan, okay, how do we intentionalize this? And how do we bring in that you need these 27 credits to graduate with a diploma in Granite School District in the state of Utah? How do we plan that from step one to graduation, that we know exactly what every class you're taking, what it is for, what it matters, what's going, so that say I'm on a computer science pathway, that I'm not taking classes in my 9th grade year that I'm going to have to take this beginning computer science class, and it would have counted for a digital studies credit, but I took a different digital studies class and a different CTE class that don't matter. And now I'm going to have to take this, and it's going to be an elective credit, right? Okay, how do we pathway that out? And it was awesome. We started to do that. We got our teachers on board. We saw our whole school culture change, is that everybody started to participate and say, well, how can I make that happen? Because it also helps our teachers. It helps their programs grow. It helps them get students that they don't have a whole load of beginning courses and nobody in their end level courses. And so I love what Jason says, that it can be an and then. That we looked at, okay, how do you get your schedule that you can be this and this? Because we can take this class that's going to count as your science credit rather than you taking, biology and chemistry because that's what everybody does. Well, if you're interested in that computer science pathway, your computer science class can count for that foundation science. So you're going to take that because that's also going to get you to the next science class that you want to take, to get you to this opportunity that you have with work-based learning or whatever, that we kind of went from there. And so we saw a lot of cool things happen. And then, from there.
Counselors are the most underrated power players in the school.
1,000%.
Seriously.
I agree. If
But
if it's done well, like
Yes.
that's the problem, is that I think even counselors don't understand the
No.
power that they have, because literally I presented yesterday at a summit and we talked about this, that, we saw things like failure rate change. That was not our intention. Our intention was for students to have a diploma and a plan. I wanted my kids to graduate and be able to go on to whatever their future held, and that they were prepared for that. My unintended outcomes of that were, we saw failure rates go down. We saw a huge jump in our CTE concentrators and completers. We saw, which then increases your graduation rate, things like that, that we really saw some cool outcomes that we never expected. And again, that was counselor driven, that we didn't, that I think from there. So
when I speak about career counseling and the both and versus the either or, I don't always get support from counselors. And I want to say this, like, my attempt to do this is because in my practice with what I do, the counselors are inundated with every single new program that comes into a school.
Yep.
They have to be SEL experts. They have to be school, like actual counts, like advising experts. They've got to know every academic pathway. They have to know not only every CTE pathway, but be experts in every CTE cluster. Then they've got to be dual enrollment experts. And they've got, every time when I hear the slogan, well, just have the counselors do it. It brings nightmares to me, because it's the same thing they hear when people say, well, Jason doesn't have a class. Let's just have Jason do it. And it's like, yeah, I don't have a class, but I have almost 400 students that I'm responsible for, me and a couple other coordinators. We don't have them in class, but they're out in industry. So I'm just saying counselors are superheroes. And I will, to this day, attribute the majority of my success was day one. I took this job. I came in. I told my boss, I said, I want to cater a lunch for the counselors. I need them on my team. I can't go against them. I need their support. And I started off by saying, I'm taking things off of your plate. I'll do X and Y and Z, and I'll do the course numbers. I'll do all that. And I still to this day think that's one of the reasons that I can attribute the majority of my success of this program to, is that counselors realized he'll do this. He's our friend. I buy them very nice Christmas gifts, because they're my people. They are my people.
Okay, I can attest to this. Jason and I were on a call one time, and in the middle of the call, he was like, no, I got to take this call. It was a counselor. He took the call and had all this counselor talk, whatever. And he solved 4 problems in 30 seconds for this counselor.
Well, thank you. And I will say one of the things is, one of my keys to do this, if any people in work-based learning or CTE are listening, I would say I know they are, is when a counselor calls me with a problem and hey, look, this kid that you denied this kid, but he really needs a second chance, or he really needs X or Y or Z. I'll say, I will take the student, but you have to take the credit. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, tell them you convinced me, because you work with them more than I work with them, and they need to know that you're their ally. So I'll take them, but you take the credit and say, look, Mr. Vanessa's on the fence. I told him you do a good job. I went to bat for you. He said he was in. And I said that's how you build that relationship. Because yeah, I do have the ability to say no to a student in Georgia. It's a selective, not elective program. But I'm always telling the counselors, like, hey, look, you take the credit. You solve the problem. Whatever I can do to help you build that relationship with that kid, let me know and we'll do it. Does it always work out? No. Sometimes we get burned. But I'd rather get burned giving a student an opportunity than not. And counselors in work-based learning, man, we just think the same. We think the same way. Sometimes it can be bifurcated between academics and careers. But here's what I was going to say. I don't want to beat this analogy to death, but I'm gonna push it a little farther. All right. So we've mentioned the boat, we've mentioned the motor, we've mentioned the driver, and I've got two more things I want to mention to us. Right. If the boat is a student's career and that motor is counseling and work-based learning done correct, right? We have the driver. That driver, I would say, is probably what I would self-advocacy. They have to learn how to drive that. But we're still missing two really important things: fuel, because you can have a boat and a motor and run out of gas and you're still struck by the wind, right? Fuel for me is the YouScience. That's the fuel in that career counseling, motor. But then if I've got a boat and a motor and a driver and fuel, but I put it in the desert, I ain't going nowhere. And that's school culture. That's school culture. You've got to put that boat in its environment. So if you take a boat with a motor and a driver, it's got full of fuel, and I put it in a desert and crank up the engine's shot. It's done. It's going to suck in all that dirt, and it's never going to recover. And so many times you've got work-based learning and CTE programs who are trying to operate in a school that is a desert to career tech ed. And it's very, very, very detrimental. And it really puts your counselors and your work-based learning coordinators and your CT practitioners on an island, because there's no way to succeed in large scale when you're not operating in the right environment. So you take all those things and you put it in water, and that water is that culture, school vision, school support, and you're really going to start seeing people make a lot of progress. And that's what I would say we've done here at my school. We've had a lot of success in a pretty rapid succession. It's because I put the boat in the water. I quit trying to operate it on land. We put it in the water and it's going to go quick. I mean, yeah. So that was, I won't beat that analogy to death, but as she was talking, I was just taking some notes. So, Dani, my only complaint so far is that I can't find you on LinkedIn to connect and learn from you. I need you to go on LinkedIn so I can follow you and learn from you.
Terrible. I'll do it, because same thing. I'm like, man, Jason, I need you. You are the cheerleader and champion of counselors. I need everybody to feel the same way, even counselors to feel the same way that this does, because I think it is huge. I think that is the tricky part, is that sometimes we've had this system for so long of how we do things, right? And it's really hard for people to want to jump out of that. That's kind of the intention of your whole podcast, right? Is that they don't want to jump out of this system that we've created. And what I'm asking them to do is very different than what they're used to doing. And so I love to see where those pockets and those places where the same things are happening, and where, other people see the value of that system.
This episode of the Disrupt Education podcast is brought to you by YouScience BrightPath, the next generation platform helping students make personalized decisions as they move from education to career.
If we truly want students prepared for life after high school, we can't rely on outdated, interest-only guidance to navigate a dynamic career future. YouScience starts with aptitude discovery, helping students build a deeper understanding of who they are and how they're wired to succeed. From there, students create plans, develop in-demand skills, validate them through industry-recognized certifications, and connect directly with employers.
The result? Intentional pathways with real opportunity.
YouScience is the only platform bringing all of this together at scale, which is why we at Disrupt Education Podcast are proud to partner with them.
Learn more at uscience.com/disrupteducation-podcast. Request a demo and let them know you heard about YouScience right here. I hear program versus culture in here, right? Like, so when it's a program, when you put the boat in sand, it's just over there, right? That's the way I see it. And culture is really, what are we really doing here? We're building this student and working with this student to design, or we're architects and designing the system for that individual, right? And that's such a different thing because I think traditionally, we were all like check boxers, or like, okay, we got to get 1, 2, 3, all the way to 27, 36 credit, whatever your state requires. We want to get them past the graduation threshold and probably want to get them into a 2 or 4 year college. That's it. That was the narrow path. And I get that. And I get that there's a lot of people that are still unfortunately really seeing that, but don't see how we are now. Everybody's doing something. It's everything's changing quickly, right? I mean, Jason, I always go back, and I had this in a conversation even today with my co-coordinator, was about, CTE and work-based learning is coming gangbusters. Like, this is not stopping. This is going to roll over. So, some of the things, Dani, creating that culture, and stepping into the position that you're in right now, it is not easy. Changing habits, changing people is extremely challenging, and it's an amazing skill. So I kind of want to like ask a little bit about what would you say would be the first couple of key moves that schools need to make or that could make to get there?
Well, I think that, I'm very lucky in the district that we work in, and even in the state of Utah, there are already a lot of really strong foundational pieces and systems that are an expectation, right? Some of our check boxes that we talk about are already things that we have to do. But I think that one of the most important things and the most important steps is exactly kind of the theme that we got going here, is that, just like Jason said, like, it has to be a partnership with whatever that looks like, whether you have work-based learning, CTE, any of that, you have college access advisors, you have any of that. The first step is everybody has to be on the same team. Because I think, and that's kind of back to our analogy, right? But this is one of my biggest problems that I try to work with right now, is that we all have value and everybody has important things. But at the end of the day, the student has to be the one that directs which of those things they need, or how they're going to utilize those things. And so my biggest thing that I would say is, number one, everybody has to be on the same team and have the same goal. So what is your mission statement? What are your values? What are you holding on to? What do you want? And that all players have the same thing, right? Because if we don't have that, then we're all just scrambling and doing whatever. We don't know what we're doing. And again, we're not going to create a system. We're just going to create that this person does this and this person does this. And it doesn't matter how great your work is if you're not all using that work together. The other thing that I would say that has been key in us really working towards these is that it has to be, again, about the student, but they have to have a system or a practice or a process to know what they are, who they are, how they want to do this, where they want to go. And so again, for us, I keep going back, is that we really use that YouScience a lot. Like, that's our number one, is that is where every student from grades 6 through 12 has an interaction with YouScience every year in Granite School District, because we want them to be able to, as they move through and as they change and grow, that they're constantly going back to, who am I? What are my strengths? What am I going to utilize those for? And how am I going to make this plan? Because otherwise, again, then their plan is not intentional. Their plan is just, well, my mom said, or my neighbor does, or my grandpa is, or the person sitting next to me thinks I'm cool if I do this. So there's none of that. And so really, like I said, YouScience was a huge driver in giving us a tool to be able to give students that opportunity. And then we work really hard as well that we have an individual meeting. We call them college and career readiness planning meetings in the state of Utah and in Granite School District. And we have an individual meeting with every student, grades 6 through 12, every year, where we review that plan. And it looks different. Again, we're not asking a 6th grader, like, what's your career pathway? What's your plan, right? They're 11 years old. They don't know. But we're talking to them about, we start with, we give lessons on superhero skills. We call them superhero skills. We're like, what are things you're good at? What do you feel good when you do? And then that translates when we go to do their YouScience and they're like, oh, we're like, these are your superhero skills. You know, how does that work? And then we build off of that. Then the next year we build into bigger. And then in 8th grade, they're really hitting it, looking at that 4-year plan. Well, what does it look like in high school? How do I take some of these aptitudes, these interests, these skill sets, translate them? And so I think really making sure that you're having that individual conversation with the student, that it has intention and purpose to that, whether that be a guiding document, definitely using an aptitude and interest, that YouScience piece, right? And then again, everybody being on the same page, that whoever those students are going to interact with, that everybody knows what the intent and purpose is for the process and going from there. And those are not easy things, right? Those are I'm like, those are the easy parts. No, like those are really big parts, but it's like finding that I feel like those are our foundation pieces. Those are where really we kind of had systems similar to that in place that we were able to build off of. And that's where we really saw change happen.
I can't even believe that I didn't know YouScience existed a year ago. Like, it was literally a year ago when, casually, I mean, not casually, but I'm just like, it was just a question on the podcast of Jason, like, what tools do you use to do your work? And you're like, the only tool I use and is the sharpest.
Yeah, he kind of yelled at us. He was like, there's only one.
I love that he loves it as much as I love it. I love to find someone else that feels like so strongly about, because it really does. I agree. Like I'm Alli, like mine was a couple years ago, right? Mine was about 5 years ago, but when I say it like changed, it altered the way I did my work and my whole viewpoint on how I did my job. I wasn't joking. And that was from me doing my YouScience, because we've had a billion different aptitudes and there's a million out there and we're supposed to use them. It's a part of counseling. It is part of a school counselor's job is we have to have those inventories, but they all suck. Like they all were just like, okay, cool. And a kid's like, awesome. Well, it told me that I should be a plumber and I'm not super interested in that. Or I should be a theater makeup artist or something crazy. And they're like, okay. And so to do this and be like, wow, this is something completely different, to where we use so much less of the career piece to really utilizing those aptitudes and getting them to come to those decisions on their own, that they're coming into those pathways. They're coming in. I'm with you, Alli, that it is crazy that it's a product that isn't utilized for everything.
If I was in the classroom today, I would hands down want to know the aptitudes of every single student in front of me. It would just be, and it's a quick scan. Like when I was setting up my classroom, it was always a goal of mine to know every student's name by the first day. Personal goal. That was really, really important, because everybody wants to be called and known by name. And if you could do that before they even walked in the door, and I would spend hours, like literally studying their pictures. I had a seating chart, so that obviously helped, but like it was very, very important. Now, if I could anchor that with like what they're good at, and not only just for like me as a practitioner, but like the students themselves, it's like two-way street. Every class they enter, every conversation they have, it completely transforms education at the student level, and it amplifies everything in a school building. You want to talk about culture, like it would be in the water, because everybody would have access to it, everybody could use it, and it would be just so much more seamless and fluid, literally. So that's Alli, where I see it as the game changer.
I built a whole presentation on how to use YouScience outside of CTE. Like a whole presentation. And so you just hit on it. A chemistry teacher, you have a seating chart. I would want to make sure that I don't have 4 extroverts sitting in the back corner. If I'm doing group work, I would want to make sure that I don't have 4 introverts in a project, because I'm going to get 4 different projects that I try to merge together at the last minute. And I don't want to have 4 brainstormers in a group, because I'm going to have a ton of ideas and no one's going to get anything done. So you mentioned that, but so that's one way you can pitch that to academic teachers is you can design your seating charts, you can design your groups, you can design your you can build in interior scaffolding by having students who are strong in an area in a group with someone who may be weak in an area, not weak in the content, but weak in the way that they may, if this is a presentation, you may put two extroverts with an introvert. I mean, so there's just all these kind of ways you can use it outside of career advising.
Yep.
You know, it is the best SEL tool possible. Because what you just mentioned, so Allie, you just mentioned, I want to know their name, I want to have these conversations, these touch points. That's SEL. That
Yep.
is social emotional learning, where the kids come in and you can know them by name. And that's when I say that you cross this magical bridge in education, and it's when you are not you're not their teacher, that they're in your class. Does that make sense? Like there's this magical bridge where it's like, oh no, like that's my teacher. Like, yeah, that's my teacher, but no, I'm in their class. Like once you cross that bridge, that's a magical bridge for a teacher to have when someone, and you can use this. So we read this book. I'm not a big fan of the book, so I'm not gonna say its name, but it was about it was something we had to do for professional development, something like Billy or Little Billy or something like that. Um, but it was talking about there are these people in these students in your class who just kind of go unnoticed. Like they're the little Billies, right? And you can use YouScience to have those personal connection points. So yeah, that it is not it is the best CTE tool I've ever used, but it is also a phenomenal tool for people across the entire district for counseling, for career coaches, for CTE directors, tracking data and planning future pathway offerings based on longitudinal data coming from the middle school.
Yep.
I mean, I just don't understand. I don't understand why it's not illegal to not use it. That's probably the strongest thing I can say. It should be illegal to not use it because if you're not using it, and again, I'm not in sales for you science. I am in education to better prepare students. And I am saying without any emotion, I can't say that. I'm passionate about it. Without any type of inflated statement, if you are using anything other than that, you are sacrificing exponential opportunity to impact your students. You're sacrificing it. You're just laying it on the altar of choosing an inferior product. It is not hyperbole for me to say that. It is that powerful. If you don't believe me, call them and ask them for a trial, run it in a pilot with one group of students, and I'm telling you, you'll realize that you're leaving all of that. You're forfeiting that opportunity growth of the opportunity cost of student growth for the sake of having and using another program. It doesn't make any sense to me.
And so, Jason, I want to bounce back into you. So once that student does start down a pathway, and you did mention, I get the teams and the pieces. I've seen, they have the squares there so you can see what type of student is. I mean, we all took the assessment. And I think that's actually something that every educator should do as well, to be honest. I mean, because like you said, Dani, like you really see it and you're like, oh, wow. I mean, I was a producer for like, audio. Here I am on a podcast, right? It is eye-opening. But let's go back to that student then, and let's talk about like work-based learning then, right? So yes, there are core courses, there are different things that they have to do academically. We've got to get them through their X amount of credits. Work-based learning, does that equal testing decisions? How does that help them validate or rethink their decisions going forward?
Yes, this helps me. This helps him validate one of my. So I built my all my first year students in work-based learning go through YouScience. It is their entire semester class, and I've broken it down into one 36 slide PowerPoint. And so like the first four slides are going over their interests. The next ones are going over their aptitudes, and they have to do two, like so part one and part two, for 5 months is how they have to do that. Um, and one of my favorite things is the last part seven and eight, is where they actually give me feedback, and it's like, what do you think? Do you feel better prepared? do you feel like your career outlook is different? If so, how? Why? And they're just giving me feedback. I said, there's no wrong answer. Just don't cuss me out. There's no wrong answer. And I love hearing that thing. I remember it was probably a year ago. I was texting you guys all that. I was texting you screenshots of
Mhm.
obviously the student name was. I'm like, look at what this kid said. Like, look what this kid said. And so, yeah, YouScience it enriches work-based learning because you're not throwing darts in the dark at a board with no numbers on it. Like we're turning YouScience turns on the lights and it puts numbers on the board and it gives you a target. Allie is famous for saying every kid gets an X,
On the
right?
map.
You know, traditional career counseling gives students a map, but there's no X on the map,
Mm.
right? They don't have a goal. Like YouScience is not like throwing darts at a blank board. It's turning the lights on, it's putting numbers on the board, and it's saying, what are you aiming for? And if you're aiming for this, here's how you throw it better. So a student may come in, and some of the best um, things that I've read from students in that qualitative part of that assessment is they're like, I really thought I wanted to be an accountant. Um, and I think I still may enjoy numbers, but YouScience showed me that I would be good at architecture. And I've done that. And they may have come to me midpoint and say, hey, look, I'd like to try a placement in YouScience or a placement based on YouScience in architecture. And then here's one other one. I had one student who would have been an architect, and I didn't have any architecture places. And so we went into YouScience and said, what are some adjacent careers to architect? And it said GIS, which is, basically building maps, and I put them with our regional commission, and they were a GIS intern flying drones and mapping out 911 routes. And they're like, this is awesome. And I was like, see, so YouScience can even, it can not just, it can change their perspective completely. I'm going from being an accountant to, an engineer or architect, or it can take them and it can nuance and finesse within a field. So they were architecture and drafting, right? And then it just kind of subtly shifted them just a little bit to the right and said, well, what about GIS? Could you potentially do that?
Mhm.
Or, what about someone who's an engineer? And they say, but I really don't want to go to college. Well, UScience can do that little subtle shift away from engineering and just say, well, what about mechatronics and PLC technicians? Right? Which is that personal logic controls that run all the conveyor belts and things like, and so it allows you to pinpoint where a student may feel comfortable and you're not just guessing. I mean, Dani said it earlier, well, my granddad did this and my dad did this. And so I'm probably going to do the same thing. And I've said before that why it is so effective is it gives me the ability to customize career counseling for a student, and it does it, and it immediately eliminates almost every barrier I can think of. Geographic barrier. You are from a small town. There is no engineering in your community, so your schools they don't offer an engineering pathway because there's no industry to hire you when you graduate. So if there's no engineering in your community, your schools don't offer it. That means no one in your community is working as an engineer because they're not in your community because they're not employed. How are you ever going to be exposed to engineering? Unless someone goes and says, based on your aptitudes, you would be a good engineer. So it allows me to move past geographical barriers. It allows me to move past socioeconomic barriers. If someone who is, in a single family or no family household, maybe they're in the foster system, and maybe they don't have someone to learn from, a parent. So any student who has any disadvantage, YouScience is the ultimate field leveler for the rich elite kid or the kid who has comes from nothing and has nothing. YouScience puts them on the same field and says, okay, I don't care about any of that stuff. Which interest surveys are notorious for magnifying, by the way. Aptitude surveys are data driven to show that they minimize those barriers, and they don't exacerbate those. But I can go in and say level the playing field and say, what do you want to do? And it allows me to push past all that. So I mean, it is absolutely 100% allows me to increase proof of concept and put students in a position to succeed with more efficacy, and that's why I use it.
Curious, Dani, from the counselor perspective and now like at the district level, how do you, kind of scale this work? How are you kind of scaling this work? And also what have you seen in terms of like validating and helping students make decisions with kind of the non teacher side or like program side. You're having different, like you're having similar conversations, it's like the same conversation, different sides of the coin. And curious like how you're seeing that evolve and everything with your work.
So I think that kind of the first part of it, right, is how we're trying to grand scale this, how we're trying to implement. And I think that one of um the biggest impactors on that is that we really are trying to create a systemic approach. This isn't something that's just like, oh, well, here's what we want you to do. So, for example, if we're circling back to YouScience, right, that we're like, hey, here's this product. I mean, YouScience is a product that is used by the state of Utah. So we don't pay for it. We don't pick it. It's here. This is your interest and aptitude inventory that's paid for by the state of Utah, and you have to use it in some way, shape, or form, right? So instead of being like, cool, okay, use it, this is what we do. We really tried to create, or are trying still to create that intentionality behind it, right? How are we using it? And how do we create those systems at each grade level so that it's like, okay, what does this look like here that builds off of each grade so that first of all of our students are getting the same thing, that it's not just like if I'm at this school or I have this counselor or I have this, then I get this really cool thing. Or if I'm a part of this program that I get to do it, that it's every student is going to have access to this and that it looks pretty similar. Now, there is some autonomy in that, and we try to create that within our systems, but we have expectations of these are the things that you have to do. We need you to have these done. And there's a specific list of things for every grade level. We then worked really hard to also provide the resources, right? Because we also know, like Jason said, there are a billion things that counselors have to do. And so for me to come in and throw one more thing on their plate and be like, you also have to do this, they lose their minds, right? So we had to create like, well, these are the systems, this is where we can use it. We have some transition courses, we have different areas where we're like, okay, these classes are going to help us do this, this is where we're going to do that. So I really think just creating that systemic approach of, yes, there's autonomy within the schools, the grade levels of how that will work best for your students, but also here's some expectations of what we want to see, because again, I love your analogy of the map, that we're putting an X on the map, right? Because at the end of the day, this is the expectation. This is what we want students to have. We want students to not just get a diploma. We don't want them to just have their 27 credits from Granite School District, get their diploma, walk across the stage and say, see you later. We really want them to have the skills, the knowledge, the information that they need to be successful in whatever it is that their next step is past Granite School District and when they leave our schools. And so these are kind of the things. So as we looked at that on the grand scale, that is one of the hardest things to do, is that we're in a district of 58,000 students. I have, we have in our secondary schools, I have 26 secondary schools, grades 6 through 12, and 110-ish counselors, right? So it's like, we're trying to get a lot of people to do the same thing, but we're trying to get that into place. And but I think that what we can do is then to kind of go back to the other place, right? Is that when we can show them the value in it. And we've had to work with not just our counselors, because me just saying, hey, this is good for you, this is great for students. Yeah, they might buy into that, but we've worked with our administrators. We've worked different things that, again, that's where it was really great for us to show those student outcomes, because not everybody likes the warm fuzzy part of it, that just like, well, kids, they're so great. And we have this, that we were really able to say, hey, we're going to improve your testing. We're going to improve your proficiency. We're going to improve your attendance by doing these things, because again, students are being placed in the right courses. They're being placed not just to the point of that I'm not just taking math, right? In Utah, you have to take secondary math 1, secondary math 2, and secondary math 3 in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Those are your graduation requirements in theory, right? But really, secondary math 3 can be opted into probably 13 different options, right? Secondary math 3 is the default, but there are all these other options that we weren't using or that schools aren't using because we're just like, well, kids take Sec 1, 2, and 3, and that's what we do, right? Well, if they're failing Sec 1 and they're failing Sec 2, they're going to fail Sec 3, and we put them behind, right? If we know what that kid's aptitudes are, we know what that student has intention and what they want to do, we can put them in construction math. We can put them in accounting. We can put them in any of these other courses. We can put them in, maybe in a math decision making, or maybe on the opposite side, we can put them in an accelerated math, that they're going to go in that different version because it's going to match what their pathway is and where they want to go, that then leads them into the places like what Jason's talking about, that then those students have the experience that if I start here, we're not waiting until 12th grade when all of a sudden they have a lot of room in their schedule, but don't really know what to do with it. Because that was one of my other really big things that were difficult, is that students would get to 12th grade and they're like, I just need home release, which pretty much means we just don't give them a class and they do nothing. And I'm like, awesome. We are really serving you well that you're coming here and taking 2 classes. And the other 6, I'm like, do you have a job? Are you doing? Nah, but I don't need these classes, so I'm not going to take them. And they're right. Like, we can't be like, well, you should really take a beginning ceramics class. Like, no, why? There's no intention behind that. And so being able to show them the pathway and have a plan from 9th grade on, and really we're starting to back it all the way to 6th grade, that we can get that. But that does take the whole system working together, because again, our schools are 6 through 8 and 9 through 12. So even that gap, that transition, that jump from junior high to high school, there has to be cohesiveness and connection, and we all have to be working together, or the system will never work and it'll stop.
Mhm.
And then our kids won't be served.
I said earlier, culture, when it's not part of the culture, it's about what you can do for me. What Dani just said, Georgia will not let students do a home release, because you know what schools don't get when you have home release? FTE drawdown for that student.
Money.
We will put a kid in an intro to ceramics class or intro to construction as a senior, because it means we get reimbursed at an FTE level for K-weight funding for that student. And that's why I say that's where work-based learning is low-hanging fruit. I can go in and say, look, you only need these 2 classes. What do you want to do? And I can take that student and put that student in an environment where they can work toward their career goals and still draw down the same funding from the state and from Perkins. But we're not doing it just by putting them in a class. So it's almost kind of like the difference between a lot of schools are like chasing culture. And I think when you have work-based learning and career counseling and school counselors working together, it's not chasing culture, it's cultivating culture. And there's a big difference in chasing it, and people want to chase it because they're like, where can I buy it? Where can I buy it? And it's like, no. It actually comes from working together, and you have to cultivate it. And those are, yeah. And also, Dani, you gave me the title. I've been trying to find a title for that article for how long, Allie? Your ex gets a map. She just gave it to me, and it's going to be The Expectation. Is that everyone gets a map?
Bam.
Hey.
I
You heard it here
appreciate that,
first.
Dani. You just solved one of my problems.
But I think that you bring up a good point, because the other part is that when we can get kids to not be doing that, if they're in courses, because even if we're just putting them in something random, they're not going to go. I don't know about where y'all are at, if this is a problem, but like our kids just don't go. And then they stop coming to school, and we're losing kids that were on track to graduate, and they get to their senior year and they're not interested in what's happening, and they just stop coming because they can, because they're like, I'm an adult, and we lose kids that all of a sudden we're tanking at the end of 2nd semester of their senior year, because they're not interested in what they see no pertinence in the courses they're being put in, where when we can get them somewhere, then we're also going to get them to graduation, because we'll lose them if not. They won't make it.
That's the underlying epistemology with the problem. Is when you have only thing you've dangled in front of a kid for their entire school career is a diploma, and they see past the diploma, then they lose interest. But when you infuse diploma and readiness and career, and they're like, oh, the diploma is a means to a career, then that infuses interest. But when all you've done is say, gotta graduate, gotta graduate. And I love the cool things like going to middle school and or elementary school. I remember like we did that great job of that here. Like my daughter, when she was in first grade, it was like class of 2032. Like they're already putting that in their head, graduate, right? Graduate. And that's great, but it's like you have to support that with career because graduating without a vision for career, I mean, you could be just as lost and maybe even less successful than someone who didn't graduate and had a vision, and taught themselves a skill. So you have to that's the culture of working together, cultivating it, not just chasing it. Dani, you're one of my new best friends. You gotta get on LinkedIn so we can connect.
I love it. I love it.
We're matchmakers here, Alli. We're making amazing connections. Want to go into a little bit of this system that we're talking about and what we're building. And this comes to the magic wand moment, right? And I'll start with you, Dani, because I know, I mean, we've heard Jason talk a lot about what he wanted to and is creating. But if you could design it perfectly, what does it look like? I know we're constantly evolving, and I don't want to say here is it and here's the silver bullet, but like, you know, what does it look like when it's running efficiently, the system, Dani?
In my perfect world, in my perfect system, is that we're partnered together as a school. Like Jason said, district school all together. The culture is there. It's an expectation. Everybody knows what's happening. But within that, everything is built around kind of that premise back to, and I think Jason teed this off perfectly for me, is that, that diploma and a plan, right?
Mhm.
Is that no matter what we do from kindergarten, pre-K, all the way to 12th grade and beyond, is that we're working not just towards that diploma and that stopping point, but we're working towards a plan. And the pieces of that are going to be included is that, like I said, every student at every grade in those secondary schools, 6 through 12 is for us, has an individual meeting with their counselor every year where they are reformatting, where they are talking about, and that everybody in the school knows that that's happening. They know what that meeting entails and the pieces of that. That is going to revolve around their YouScience. It's going to revolve around what are their aptitudes? What are their interests? How is that working? How does that attach to their current courses that they're taking, their future courses that they're taking, and then into what happens after they leave our systems. So after they leave this into post-secondary, whether that be career, education, whatever it is they're choosing to do, how does that translate and how do we plan towards that? And within that, like I said, we're not just creating that the counselor and our CTE coordinators are the driver of that bleeds into everything that we do as a school, to where even we were getting to where it was really amazing in my school that our fine arts department was creating pathways, that they were like, hey, if you're interested in just getting your art credit, these are the classes you need to take. This is the order you need to do them in, to where we literally had maps for all courses of this is how you work through these courses and where you can plug them in dependent upon what you want your end goal to be. And I really think that we can, when we do that, we all work together, we create this system, then again, it provides the opportunity for the student to be the driver of that. That our students, we take that I don't know out. That circling all the way back to my very beginning thought, right, is that we no longer have students in our schools that are saying, I don't know, whether that be to course selection, whether that be to future planning, whether it be to educational goals, anything like that, that there is no I don't know, that no matter what they're doing, it is with intention. And that can include that we have a lot of kids that we're talking about the perfect pathway, right? But we have a lot of students, a large amount of our students in our district that aren't making that pathway. They have credit recovery. They aren't making classes. And for some of them, they aren't even going to make it to that diploma. So for them, we aren't just going to say, well, that sucks. You have too many credits to make up. We don't know what to tell you. See you later. Go on to there. It's like, no, what is our pathway for them? How are we going to get them there? How are we going to get them to the place that they need to go so they can have that sustaining life outside of our system that we've provided for 12 years, that they can then move on and that it bleeds into our communities. And really backing down to where we can see economic mobility, where we can see, movement, where we can see career growth, that not just in our schools, but it filters out to our communities as a whole.
Yeah. So with that, Jason, I want to bounce to you. Like, so obviously, with aptitude planning experience, that experience does take an ecosystem outside of school. So what does it take to build that ecosystem consistently, that supports these pathways in our students, whether it's local, national, international, hybrid, on-site?
The most efficient way, again, and I'm gonna use the examples that I've done is I use YouScience to increase efficacy with student success in their placements. I use it to identify students who I may not have had access to. So let's just say that an engineering firm is looking to hire someone. I may not have that student in work-based learning, but I can go through and look all of YouScience for students who have engineering in the top 3 aptitudes or interests, and I can then target market those students, right? All that comes down to me is it allows me to have more success quickly, more success more quickly. And then I leverage that success from me placing a student with one employer, and I leverage that with another employer, and then with another employer. And so what begins to happen is I mean, it's kind of like FOMO, but not really. I mean, but kind of. uh, Industry, once they see their competitors have a talent pipeline to your school system, and they see the success that they're having, and they see that, oh, wait, they just jumped me in line for access to talent, that really begins to drive interest. So that's how you tie all the amazing things that Dani's talking about there that are happening within a school. That's how you use work-based learning is the glue between school and industry. And that's why I mean, you've heard me say how many times on your podcast, industry is in no position to trust education. We've broken too many promises. That's because we've misused work-based learning or not used it at all. Work-based learning is the glue between school and industry. And so it's my job to collaborate with the counselors, to collaborate and to take the talent that's being built in the CTE classroom and to find and place that student in industry. I am connecting those two together. I can do that with better success by using YouScience, partnering with my counselors, and then once that's there, I begin to leverage it and market it, tell the story. How I told you about my friend Tony May, he listens to this. So Tony, how you doing, buddy? He's from Alabama. He's the state director of work-based learning, and he has this really cool saying. Dani, you may have never heard it, so you'll like it. So Alabama, really southern, really country, more than me. I'm in South Georgia, but he says it's a sorry dog that won't wag his own tail. And that's what you got to do. Work-based learning allows the school to wag your tail publicly and show what students are being built, show they can have success in the industry, that they can be that proof of concept and bridge the gaps in those critical labor shortage areas. And so that's how I went about doing it. And I mean, I speak on that topic a lot. So I'm being very consciously precise. I mean, I just gave an hour and 15-minute keynote on that one topic. But it is a passion of mine to begin to take the talent that's being built in our school system, that local businesses' tax dollars are funding us to build, and to make sure those businesses whose tax dollars are coming into our school system have access to that talent, and that they know that if they don't have a strategy to hire that talent that we're building from their tax investment in us, someone's going to hire that student, and it may very well be their competitor. And when you leverage it that way, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then they say, okay, let's talk, because they realize I'm giving them an access to capitalize and return and get some return on investment that they've just been writing off. Right? I've just been giving my tax dollars. So that's how I've done it. And another real quick shout out, Dani, I may put you on the payroll to be my muse. She just said, there is no I don't know. That's gonna be my new t-shirt slogan. It's gonna be, there is no I don't know. Like, I don't know. Yes. Dani, like payroll. I don't know. And
I
that's gonna
love
be
it.
There's things
So good.
happening in my world right now, and I can guarantee you that there is no I don't know in a school. That is going to be a huge. I will have to send you a commission check for that one, Danny.
I love
Well
it.
done.
It's going to be amazing.
Well
It's going to
done.
be great.
Okay, so I might be naive, but like just this past year, I learned about like planes that fuel other planes in the air. Okay, like I didn't know that was like a thing.
Yeah,
Just
that's
I
pretty.
thought when planes ran out of fuel, sometimes they just like land and get more fuel. And but okay, so I can't be the only one. I'm saying this because Jason, I feel like with work-based learning and but partnering with industry. Industry is that plane, that other plane that's going to refuel
Mhm.
you like but if you break industry's promises, you're going to have to
Yeah,
find somewhere on land.
yeah,
It's going to slow
mhm,
you down.
yeah,
And that's where I think there's a lot of missed opportunities in
yeah.
school, and the way you frame it is so powerful
Well, they
because
just
of
feel so
that.
exploited, you know? I mean,
Mhm.
you can't keep going to people and saying, "We need your help, we need your help, we need your help," and you not offer anything in return.
Mhm.
So, industry gets asked to support, and they're so good at supporting and doing and building and helping and paying and donating and services and in kind and all that coming and speaking. They're so good at that. It's time for education to step the crap up and start giving them a return on that investment. It's not about altruism. It's not about philanthropy. Just do it because the good old kids need some help, right? No, it's about you invest in our program and we make these students employable and they come work for you, and that in cyclical unison that begins to make them want to be more involved, which gives us more opportunity to make students more career ready. And it's a robust strategy for development within a community. And I'm baffled almost as much as people who don't use YouScience. I'm baffled that it is not a priority for schools. I mean, work-based learning is the glue between your instructional programs, both academic and career and industry. And we've got to start fulfilling promises, or gosh, sometimes I'm worried we may not get those industry people back. They may just find other avenues for talent.
Or
Um,
other planes in the sky they can refuel.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Other ponds they can go fish. Well, I'm at South Georgia. So let's keep it simple. I can go fish in another pond somewhere, right?
We've we've hit planes,
Boats.
haven't hit automobiles, boats, planes, trains, automobiles, and boats. Listen,
Yeah.
this is a great conversation, but I want to bring it to a close here. But there is a lot of awesome key things that we've talked about. We talked about students choosing their futures and really making that decision. And I really like how you put the entire boat analogy out there, Jason. And I think I saw Dani writing some of that down. She's going to take that to our next meeting. Um,
Look, it's all there.
yeah, there you go. You drew a boat.
I had to get a
Uh,
Sharpie so I knew it wouldn't go away.
these systems that are creating clarity, we're not just throwing darts in the dark here. I mean, this is intentional. There's no more guessing, and I think that's what we all really love about YouScience and taking a look at the aptitudes of us. Two last quick questions for Dani. Number one, what really surprised you the most after you started this whole thing? And then the second question is, what was one of your aptitudes? We give those up. So
All right. So, first question, probably what surprised me the most, honestly, was our student outcome data. Is
mhm.
that I really was started small. Like I started small with my, panel of control, like what I was looking at, and I really was just trying to make my job better. I wanted to serve students in a more productive manner. I wanted to be able to know that when I met with my students to take their little graduation application the end of their senior year and give them their candy bar and be so excited and say, "So what's next? Tell me, where are you at?" That they could tell me something instead of like, "Well, I don't know. And so it really started out as that. What I was shocked by is how much it could move to an entire school, and how we did see growth, how we saw change in things like student proficiency and failure rate, that we saw huge change in our CTE concentrators and completers, in our students taking advantage of our courses at what we call our Granite Technical Institute, which is kind of that place where Again, if we can't have a $4 million auto lab, we can have one in our district where our students go in. We saw a huge increase in that. And then also just not just that, but that demographically, that was also matching our school, is that all students were increasing and performing in those areas. It wasn't just a select number, that when we really pulled that data, that our number of students who were passing, our number of students participating in these courses matched the demographics of our school, which just means that we were placing students in the right place. We could go deep into like our clearinghouse data for, college after, or different things, that all of that improved by simply intentionally scheduling students, creating pathways and creating opportunities for them. And that was super surprising to me. And really, I'll be honest, that's how it's become a bigger sell, to do this on a district level. And to do that is because that's what really matters, is those student outcomes and where we see money go, right? And so it's been awesome. And for me, it just made everything else better. So that was the most surprising, but also the most beneficial outcome of it. And then as far as YouScience, my biggest aptitude is I'm an idea generator. I'm a brainstormer. So I'm with Jason. I'm real great. Jason, I'll spit them out to you all day long, but I really hope that there's going to be someone else on our team that's going to be able to that's really going to follow through, because we can spitball these all day long. And I'm real great at creating the system, but I am not spectacular at sitting in the system I've created. And so that did blow my mind. Like when it's great to read those things and not just your career matches, because obviously my career matches also were a school counselor and a school administrator, and then also a collegiate professor, which I also do on the side. So my top 3 jobs, I'm actually doing all of them. But those things. So yeah, those are my YouScience results.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing those. I think, Alli, what would be amazing is if educators got together in each school and everybody did them. And I don't know if you do that, Dani, or not, but where now you can know, you're not putting all the same educators and practitioners at the same table who are all, one or the other, which I'm sure in the lunchroom, that's what ends up anyway. So, but yeah, take us out, Alli. What do you think?
So, we just we went off the shore, this episode. But like that's really what's important for students, is for them to feel like it's okay with something that's like not familiar. And school, I would say this to students all the time. It's really important that they know that this is like a safe place, that they are getting guidance, and like there are people behind them that really want to help move them forward, right? And like outside of school, it's if you just give them a diploma, but like no plan, like you said, Dani, like I just feel like that is the wrong way. And not everyone like can just build a boat, and like they have, like I'm a skydiving instructor, Dani, so it's like not everyone just like wants to jump out of the plane, like, right? They need help. And so we have to kind of guide students through that. Jason, I loved your boat analogy, taking it to the next level with, the water culture, the fuel, the engine, the captain, all of that. So thanks for going along with that.
Extra.
And yeah, I just think that's why like today's conversation like really, really matters in terms of like building school systems and getting it right. And like I've wanted to have a school counselor on the podcast for a long time, because I know the power that they have in a school, and being able to actually like, they see the master schedule, they see like the boats being built or not being built. Like you guys have to have really, really hard conversations like with students at every grade level. And so getting that right is a huge stepping stone in like affecting school culture and really disrupting education. So yeah, the
Yeah, well
direction
put.
and getting off the
Yes.
shore is really important.
Yes. And we learned a lot about the counseling side of things. And thank you. I think when you navigate with clarity, and not just guessing, it makes everybody's job easier. it's about really helping these students and everybody for that matter to navigate with clarity. I love clarity. It's a big seller for our internship program that we run. It's about giving confidence and a direction. Even when it isn't fully clear yet, you can start steering people in the right direction towards Alli's X there, and that is how you disrupt education. Dani and Jason, we want to thank you both for sharing your stories, your passion. It is great to have practitioners in education here that are really changing the way we do things for the better and ultimately changing lives for the better. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for Alli Dahl, jumping out of planes, I'm here looking for the next boat to get on. I'm Peter Hostrawser. Thank you all for hanging out with us on the Disrupt Education Podcast. We'll catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Disrupt Education Podcast. If this episode sparked an idea, challenged your thinking, or helped you see education differently, well, that's exactly why we're here. We're highlighting real stories and bold ideas shaping the future of learning. A quick thank you to our sponsor, YouScience BrightPath, the next generation platform helping students make personalized decisions as they move from education to career. If you're serious about connecting students to real opportunity, head to youscience.com/disrupt education-podcast. Request a demo and let them know you heard about YouScience right here on the Disrupt Education Podcast. For more episodes and clips and ways to connect, you can always visit disrupteducationpodcast.com. I'm Peter Hostrawser. Keep disrupting. We'll see you next time on the podcast.